3%. So that could change, and of course those numbers could change. So if it goes that way, obviously the deficits will begin to grow in the various places in your budget. You need at some point to figure out in a more, I would say, with more analysis, a road resurfacing program that has a regular program of resurfacing every year based on the condition of the roads and the wear and tear that goes on them. We didn't find in your documents a regular commitment within your forecast to fund that. It's not something that will ever go away, so you got to find a way to fund that. It's almost an operating fixed asset expense.
The board did just, God, it must have been roughly a year ago, we accepted a report from Manhart, 4 or 5 years.
We have a 5-year plan.
Excellent, excellent.
But it's not here for you to find.
Right.
So you're saying-
You got a plan, that's good. Well, that explains that. So. Of course, as we said, your fund balances will diminish over time, and then we'll show you that. And there aren't a lot of dollars after you take care of your operating deficits and your road resurfacing needs over the long term. There won't be a lot of money left over for capital. Those are the long-term sort of where you're standing right now, if the assumptions we made are correct. But I'm saying again, assumptions can change. All right? Sure.
All right, real quickly. We just kind of came up with a scenario here based on these assumptions, and I'll go through those in a second. We call it the do-nothing scenario, meaning you don't change rates, you don't change property taxes other than what's based on these assumptions here. And we looked at the major general fund revenues, sales, use, income, and utility taxes, and said they'll increase at 2.5%. Property taxes increase at 2.5%. All the general fund revenue sources we assume would remain flat. We assume no utility rate increases over the period. All expenses would increase at 3%, as Mike said earlier. We assume no new residential or major commercial development coming into the community. And we assumed a 20-year cycle for road resurfacing. You just said you had a 5-year plan, but our 20-year cycle just basically spreads out from what we could tell the amount of roads you have over a 20-year period. It's like a $200,000 a year road program starting out and increases over time. Now, making that assumption, all those assumptions, excuse me, you're left with this. And Mike will explain this to you.
Probably doesn't need much explanation. If you try to do the things that we assumed there, the fund balance that you started with will eventually be depleted. So you've got some years to make adjustments and have things. Maybe you'll get a big sales tax contributor in that period. Maybe your costs will rise less than what we've shown here. Maybe some other revenues will go. The assumption that Derek made about your revenues, I mean, we took a good look at that. And most of the revenues that we showed there to go up are most of your revenue streams. So there's a lot of revenues you got and a lot of line items, but they don't add up to a lot. It didn't look like there was a lot of room for growth in the ones that you had. So barring some other change. So basically, this is the track you're on if you make no adjustment. But you got plenty of time to look at it, and things can change. So we'll keep going. So we tried to say, well, in that situation, there are many things that can change, and there's many options you have for trying to do things to enhance your financial projections and trends, because that's what they are. So we said, well, you got to create a fixed asset fund. We did that in the budget for you. So that you're just going to need to do at some point, so that you're not sort of a la carte once a year chasing after your fixed asset needs. You're just ready to go and you have the plan and organized. You've kind of already provided that in the budget lines. We need to take a look at your enterprise funds and see what we can do to get them paying for the expenses that are allotted to them, so that the subsidy from the general fund can be reduced. And of course, your road resurface program, as Derek said, that's something that you need to work with, because it will never go away. It's sort of a commitment you have to make. So we've got a couple of scenarios here. Again, there are many that you could do. So we thought, well, what can we do here to work on the enterprise fund part of the budget here? Because in our opinion, that's probably, after we pulled all the numbers apart, that's probably the biggest driver of your future difficulties, because costs are going to go up and your revenue base is already too low. So as time goes on, the program's going to get worse. So we said, what would it take to balance the budget in 5 years? so that in 5 years, your revenues are matching your expenses. So we said, well, there's a way to make that happen. You could raise your rates immediately sufficient to balance the budget, but the rate increases would be very large to do that because you're pretty misaligned in those numbers based on our assumptions. So we said, let's take it over 5 years and see what we can do. So what we said in our projection was you take $500,000 of your general fund balance that you've got available and apply it to the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. That is sort of a cushion you can use to gradually adjust rates over time to try to reach a balanced budget where your revenues are equaling your expenses in the 5th year. So we assumed a normal increase in expenses, and we assumed a regular rate plan over the next 5 years that raises the customer cost $5 per month. Again, there's many ways you can do it. You can stretch it out longer. If you want to go longer with that and reduce the rates, your costs, you can hold your line on cost better, so that will make these numbers go down. Or you could stretch it out. In stretching it out, you're going to take a little more money from your fund balance in order to put it in here so that the fund begins to operate effectively. We're going to show you in a minute why that helps you in the long run. So again, we'd be taking some of that general fund balance there, and it shows that. Oh yeah, so basically the lines here tell you what's going on. The black line running there is the fund balance. And so you put the immediate $500,000 into the fund balance. So on the left there, it's pretty high. And over time, as your revenues begin to rise through your rate adjustment plan, and your costs go up as we've projected, you're drawing down that fund balance. You're using it to stretch out the point of the balanced budget. So in the 5th year there, if you can see over to the right there, the line meets. The line along the bottom is the target balance. So remember that target balance we talked about, the reserve you need. That's 2 months, equal to 2 months of operating expense. So they join up in 5 years. So it's a gradual approach to trying to get you one of those, that enterprise fund is working the way it should.
All right, same concept with the sanitation fund. We have a sanitation rate scenario here. It's 5 years. This, not to repeat everything Mike just said with the water sewer, it's the same exact concept, except this one was in a little bit better shape. If you recall, the $48,000 annual deficit. So it only requires a $112,000 contribution in order to get this rate smoothing over time. And as you can see on the bottom there, it would reduce your capital fund balances available to $1.6 million from $1.7. Now, looking at the average annual increase of customer, it would equate to about $1.83 more for sanitation services per month, per year that will build. And that's what you need to raise the rates to in order to have the 2 lines meet in the end. So what both of these concepts do is get you a balanced budget within the fund, and you're meeting your target balances, whatever they are, whatever you decide what you want to establish them as by year 5. And then going forward, you'd have to make slight rate adjustments in order to meet the needs of the fund based upon the cost increases you're experiencing at that time.
Sanitation, you're saying, is that sewer or is that trash?
Trash.
Trash, okay.
Yes.
I think you need to look at your funds with a little bit bigger increase, because I'm in the transportation industry and I'm seeing 10 and 15% swings right now. I'm seeing trucking companies' margins down to next to nothing, and I'm seeing a driver shortage, which is mean that it's going to cost you more to put a driver in the seat of that truck.
Sure. So, that's the beauty of establishing some sort of forecast document which would aid in these projections, is that you can make an adjustment, not call it 3%, call it 5, call it 6 or 7, but it's going to put more demands to increase rates in order to
also the good news is our garbage service contract is up February 1, so we've already started the works of getting RFPs for garbage services. We've been working with Walter Willis from Swalco, and so that's in the works, and we'll be coming to the board in the near future with information. So the good news is there's a very competitive market right now, so that might help us somewhat with that.
I just want to be clear. When you're saying that it's
Use the mic, George Andrews.
when you're saying that it's balanced, you're saying that, that there's enough money in that account to replace, well, not in the sanitation, but in the water account, to replace equipment as it needs to be replaced, or is that a separate fund?
These assumptions assume that the water and sewer fund will be contributing toward the fixed asset fund as part of these budget numbers. So the money comes out of water and sewer and goes to your fixed assets. So the fixed assets are covered in the expected expenses already. So they're in there.
So they're in there?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So in effect, what ends up happening here is over time, you get to a balanced budget. You're running in that fund some deficits in those 5 years. But you're using the money you put in there to pay for those while you gradually work toward a balance. So as we said before, you can stretch that out and take it longer and have the increases be less. There's all sorts of ways you can adjust.
I have a question for you, Mike. So let's say we hash through all this and we decide, okay, we're going to raise, you know, the sanitation rate, the water rate, X amount. Then you mentioned that you plan for future increases. So do you come up with a formula that's, say, based on the CPI or based on something that there's going to be an automatic 1% increase in, you know, 2 years, or so you're not reevaluating and going to a vote every time there's an increase?
Right. What we do in Graves Lake, and more towns are doing it all the time now, is they develop a long-range forecast for their enterprise, let's say water and sewer, and they're developing an estimated rate plan, and then they adopt that. In our case, in Graves Lake, our ordinance requires that we look at that plan every year. So there's already an adopted increase.
Okay.
So we may back off on that. If the expenses didn't rise, or we have a reason to believe that we would project to take more money in than we would need, well, then we back off and adjust the long-term plan. So a number of communities don't do that, but they do have say a 10-year rate plan, say 3% per year. The quality of the projections and the quality of the assumptions. If you're good at your assumptions, you know, of course, you're going to be more accurate. If not, you know, and that's the beauty of having a set of assumptions in your forecast, because you can find out where you were wrong. So they're going to go right to us, oh, that was the 1 or 2 that did it to us. So it's all good stuff.
Okay.
All this then, of course, leads you to the point of where you're trying to provide for the road resurfacing fund. And so if you're thinking about this architecture a little bit, the way you're doing it right now, your general fund is subsidizing your enterprises. So that means there's less money in the general fund for whatever purposes. In this scenario, we're assuming now that you put money in and you have a rate plan that will get you to a balance so that the general fund is no longer being called upon to pay any costs on an annual basis into the enterprises. So that's the basis of this. That's the architecture of this. So then we say, now, what's the revenue coming in and going out of the general fund, and how much of it do we have to do the first thing after operations, which is the road resurface cost each year. So we say we have a 20-year estimate of that. And that, in effect, is taking your street map, or your streets off of Google Maps, and estimating the lengths. And it's in your book. I think we put it in your book. Last tab. It just gives you an approximate number each year with the cost increase included. It's not much different than what Graves Lake does in our program. So this estimates a cost that will be needed for road resurfacing over that long period. It's different than a 5-year study, because the 5-year study is based on engineering evaluation of your streets, which is really great. This is just a 20-year, so that you make sure in the long term that your revenues, you're setting aside the revenue to do the work. So again, we made some assumptions as to cost. And again, the first year is about $205,000. If you're doing your roads over a 20-year period, about the equal amount each year. And then we, of course, after MFT, the general fund needs to put some money toward that, because the MFT, as projected, won't pay for all that. So you have to take some money out of the general fund. Again, they're not different than Graves Lake. We do about $1,300,000 a year, and most of that is general funds, because the MFT fund didn't generate enough to do it. So here, we would assume that you have to take some of that money now from the general fund that's being generated there, put it toward this. And as you can see, that goes up over a period because the costs go up. MFT doesn't go up as fast. So here, that black line is your general fund revenues in excess of operating expenses. Now that you